Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. It is conference championship week in the NFL. Chiefs, Bills in the AFC, Eagles, and the surprising Washington Commanders in the NFC. I think at the beginning of the season, had you said Bills, Chiefs in the AFC, a lot of people would have said, yeah, that makes sense. You know, Ravens, I think many people thought the Bengals would be right in the thick of it. But if you had said Bills, Chiefs, a lot of people would have said that makes sense. NFC, had you said the Eagles made the conference championship, people would have said, yeah, that adds up. The Commanders are the big surprise, and they've been led by their rookie quarterback, Jayden Daniels out of LSU, who has been absolutely sensational in the postseason after a rookie campaign in the regular season that will certainly net him Offensive Rookie of the Year. And watching what Jayden Daniels and the Commanders offense did against Detroit in the divisional round a week ago, it got me thinking sort of a choose your quarterback situation. And I wanted to play the game on this video today. Obviously, it's a Packers centralized channel. You're starting a franchise tomorrow. And you're only given two choices at quarterback. You can have Jayden Daniels or Jordan Love as your quarterback moving forward. Who are you going with? And it's fascinating for a bevy of reasons. You know, at the end of last season, a lot of people probably had Jordan Love in their top 5, at worst in their top 10 of quarterbacks in the NFL. He was kind of after that performance in Dallas and what Love and the Packers offense did in the second half of the regular season, Jordan Love was kind of the it guy. He was the quarterback that all these national analysts, pundits, whatever, were talking about and saying, like, Jordan Love is the next big thing at quarterback in the National Football League. That's how good he was in the second half as his first year as a starter, and certainly in that playoff win against Dallas. This year, Jayden Daniels is stealing the show in the playoffs. This year, it's the rookie quarterback for the Washington Commanders, kind of taking that spotlight that Jordan Love had after Wild Card Weekend a year ago. Big difference, though, obviously, is Jayden Daniels won on Wild Card Weekend in Tampa, and then divisional round weekend against Detroit, whereas the Packers slipped up against the 1-seed San Francisco 49ers a year ago. And among the many things I'm impressed by with Daniels, his composure. The guy never looks rattled. That crowd was rocking in Detroit. It was a ruckus crowd in Detroit a week ago on divisional round weekend. I mean, it was, as expected, a ruckus crowd, loud start to finish, and it was everything most people expected, a fan base for the Lions that is starving, not for relevance anymore, but starving for a championship, starving for a crack at a Super Bowl, and they had finally reached the pinnacle of being the number 1 seed, and they win the NFC North, and they slaughter the Vikings in Week 18 to claim the 1 seed, and they get the bye, and it was a well-needed bye for Detroit as they were dealing with a litany of injuries. And then they come out and they get 45 hung up on them by Daniels in Washington. And the dude, like, the moment in 2 playoff games for Jayden Daniels has never looked too big for him at any point in time. Just cool, calm, collected. And you ask yourself, well, is that going to change in Philly? This is their 3rd road game in the playoffs in as many weeks. I believe Jayden Daniels will struggle more given just the difference in talent with the Eagles' defense and what was left of the Lions' defense after it had been ravaged with all those injuries. I think if he has a similar performance against Philly in that climate, and I'm talking about the weather against that defense, to what we saw him do against Detroit, I would be pretty surprised. But while I don't expect him to have the game he did against the Lions, I don't think the moment will be too big for Jayden Daniels. If he wasn't rattled by that crowd in Detroit, you have to call it what it is. He's just a cool customer. And so we circle back to the topic at hand. Jordan Love, Jayden Daniels are starting a franchise today, tomorrow. If those are your only two choices at quarterback, who are you taking? Let's start with Daniels. His mobility, and it's true mobility. Like, he is a true dual threat to the absolute definition. It gives him such another element. He was second in the NFL in rushing yards by quarterbacks. He had 891 rushing yards this season, behind only Lamar Jackson. And here's some perspective for you when I say that Jayden Daniels had 891 rushing yards, second among all quarterbacks in the NFL. To try to like bottle that up for you, to shine a light on it, Jayden Daniels finished with more rushing yards this year than guys like David Montgomery, Breece Hall, and his own running back in Washington, Brian Robinson Jr. And he did so with less rushing attempts than all three. Breece Hall had more rushing attempts with the Jets this year than Daniels did with the Commanders. Daniels had more yards. David Montgomery, although he missed the end of the regular season before coming back for the playoffs against Washington, had more rushing attempts than Jayden Daniels this past season. Daniels had more rushing yards. Brian Robinson had more totes for Washington in their ground game than Daniels did. Daniels had more yards. And so he had more yards than some pretty good starting running backs in the NFL, and he did so on fewer attempts. I think the worry with Jayden Daniels in that style of play is obviously the injury element and the risk that comes with it. I would describe Daniels just in 1 year in the NFL, and we saw it at LSU. At LSU, he was a reckless runner. He took some massive, massive hits. He's been able to limit those in his rookie season. I would not describe him as a reckless runner anymore. I would describe Daniels as a crafty runner who still hasn't perfected really like the idea of the quarterback slide. He still needs to get that cemented in as his next step, his next sort of evolution as a quarterback who can truly break down a defense by using his legs. Because the last thing Washington needs is another RG3 situation. And what's so kind of crazy about Jayden Daniels landing with Washington, one of my buddies is a Commanders fan, and before the draft last year, we were talking quarterbacks, and it was kind of assumed, obviously, Caleb Williams is going to Chicago, and then Washington's on the clock. And, you know, by the time the draft lined up, everyone kind of knew, like, oh, they're going to take Jayden Daniels. And when my buddy and I were talking about Daniels and his time at LSU and even Arizona State, we were both saying, like, man, he has to learn how to get out of harm's way when he runs the ball. Because I had said his running reminded me of RG3. And so it was kind of poetic that he then landed with Washington. And the last thing the Commanders need, you remember the rookie season RG3 had? And then he had the injuries pile up and just derail his career after that. Jayden Daniels is built, you know, physically very similarly to RG3. And he has, it might be way back in the back of his mind or in the back of his brain, but he has that notion where he has so much confidence that he thinks he can juke anyone out, that he can spin free of any would-be tackler. And it's just, it typically doesn't work that way in the NFL. And so I do think one thing in the offseason he needs to get better at is avoiding the hits. And I think he's done a pretty good job of it in his rookie season, but there's still room for improvement. He is showing in one season, and, you know, quarterbacks can have a sophomore slump. Look at C.J. Stroud in Houston. You know, his rookie season was better than his second year. Obviously, a lot of that can be attributed to the struggles of the offensive line, but still Stroud didn't have a good sophomore campaign compared to what we saw in his rookie season. And while it wasn't a rookie season for Jordan Love last year, I think his year one as an NFL starter, especially the second half, was better than what we saw in year two. And again, with Love, you can attribute some of that to injuries and when was he truly healthy, but you can't use it as a crutch or an excuse. The first year is better than the second. I say that to say we don't know what Jayden Daniels will look like next year in year 3, year 4, year 5. But if all indicators on his rookie season can be a telltale sign of what is to come for Jayden Daniels, he's going to be a sensational quarterback in the National Football League. Just has to, you're always fine-tuning and tweaking things, and I think one of his things that he needs to tweak is very, very tweakable, fixable, if that's a word, tweakable, and that is just avoiding the big hits, avoiding those unnecessary shots in the ground game when you can, veer and dance out of bounds or slide and avoid it at all costs, instead of going for that extra yard on a 2nd and 8 run where 5 yards is fine, but you really want to get the 6. He's a good quarterback, man. The Tampa game didn't surprise me. The Detroit game did. And I know Detroit had a ton of injuries defensively. But you look at what they did in Week 18 against a really good Minnesota offense, and then to see what Washington was able to do to just dismantle them on a huge stage like that for any quarterback, let alone a rookie quarterback going on the road. Jayden Daniels, he just already appears to be the real deal. And so you talk about the aspect, though, Love, Daniels, who would you choose? If you look at the 4 remaining quarterbacks, there's an interesting sort of note, I guess, that ties them all together. Like, I look at Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. He is effortlessly mobile, as is Jayden Daniels. Josh Allen is a more than willing runner who invites the contact. Patrick Mahomes, we see it every postseason, way more than he does in the regular season, where he just goes to use his legs more when Kansas City needs to make a play. You have the 4 quarterbacks remaining that are all super, super mobile. And 3 of them, I don't know if I'd put Mahomes in this category, but Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Jayden Daniels are true dual threat quarterbacks. And you look at Jordan Love, I would say he's somewhat capable, but not nearly to the degree those 3 are. And again, we don't know how much the injuries factored in. I would say they did certainly to him using his legs this year. Love only had 83 rushing yards this season, 247 in his first year as a starter. And while being like overly mobile isn't a necessary requirement of the quarterback position, I do think it is interesting seeing who the final 4 quarterbacks standing are and how the league seems to be pivoting towards more mobile, true dual threat quarterbacks. And Daniels is that. And I can't get over the ice in the veins mentality he showed in Detroit and Tampa Bay and helping lead Washington to the NFC Championship against Philadelphia. It is Mitch. I am on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. Love or Daniels? Who would you choose? Let's go to Jordan Love. I've referenced it twice already in this video. The second half of last year, after the playoff game against Dallas, he was the it guy. He was the next superstar quarterback that everyone was talking about. And this year, again, it's not an excuse, but you have to factor in the injuries. He had multiple injuries. MCL sprain week 1 in Brazil against Philly, had the elbow sprain late in the season, had a groin injury in the middle of the season, suffered in the game. I believe it was suffered in the game against Jacksonville. There really didn't feel like there was a rhythm with the season that Jordan Love had. Like, he couldn't ever find a rhythm. A lot of that because of the injuries. And then in the last month, the passing game kind of just went to shit. Like, Green Bay's passing game regressed to a point that really hadn't been seen since the first half of the 2023 season. And yeah, it was alarming. Like, it's concerning. I don't think you aren't going into this offseason assured that everything's going to be fine and dandy with the passing game. That's just the hope that, like, hey, Matt LaFleur's resume and the sample size we've seen, they'll figure it out. Jordan Love, we've seen the glimpses. We've seen him piece it together for long stretches. Again, primarily in his first season. They'll be able to figure it out. Like, that's the hope you're clinging on to if you're a Packers fan. And you have to note the struggles in the passing game, the regression that we saw. It's not all on Jordan Love. It certainly isn't. You could, like you have to split the blame pie up into different slices and different wedges for the passing game and it taking a step back mightily in the last month of the season. I do still believe, and maybe it's false hope, but I don't think it is, because of what we saw in the back half of 2023, it's in there for Jordan Love. Like, it's there. They just have to find that consistency and that flow. Because he showed he can be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. There's just more doubt now because of how year 2 finished. And I think it's super, super critical that the balance between letting Jordan Love sling it while also making sure he finds a way to limit the dumb interceptions. Every quarterback's going to throw picks. You have to limit the dumb ones. I think Josh Allen, in his evolution as a quarterback, he has gone from a quarterback who makes so many stupid interceptions. You live with interceptions. It's the stupid ones that make you pull your hair out. And he has gone from that quarterback early in his career to finding the perfect balance of still being a risk taker, using his legs more, but still being a risk taker in the passing game, but making sure they're calculated risk. They come at what are deemed to be better times than others. And he has limited his interception total while his efficiency as a quarterback hasn't taken a dip at all. Josh Allen has perfected sort of threading that needle as a passer. I'm limiting the dumb interceptions, but I'm just as effective as a thrower in the NFL. And now he's either the MVP winner this year or second behind Lamar Jackson. That's what the Packers have to figure out with Jordan Love. And I'm not saying Jordan Love can be Josh Allen or will be Josh Allen. I'm strictly talking about the dumb interceptions we saw in the first half of this season, him going from 11 interceptions in the first 8 games. Think about this number. Jordan Love had 11 interceptions in the first 8 games. In the last 7 games, he had 0. And then he had 3 in the playoff game against Philadelphia. And you can zoom the microscope all the way out and say, hey, 0 interceptions the last 7 games after 11 in the first 8. That's great. But we saw a quarterback, when you dig deeper, we saw a quarterback who took less chances, took less risk, didn't take as many deep shots down the field, and they have to find that balance between how do we get him to not throw the pick 6 we saw against Detroit at Lambeau Field at the end of the first half, take those ones away, but also make sure he's taking the shot plays that we saw throughout the season, primarily early on in the year. Those 50-50 balls where you want to give Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson a chance, where they aren't wide open, but Love knows if I put it in the right place, it's either my guy getting it or it's incomplete. They have to find that balance, because I thought, whether it was by Love's own doing or Matt LaFleur in his ear or a combination of the two, Jordan Love was not nearly as aggressive in the second half of this season, especially down the stretch, in the passing game having its own problems and its own woes, and guys not getting open, and Green Bay being near the top of the league in dropped passes and drop pass rate. All of that factors in. But they have to find this offseason that, again, that balance between here's where you can take your shots, pick your spots, just more calculated risk instead of being overly conservative, because it did look like Jordan Love was really reined in those final few weeks. And Green Bay, you're not going to win if your quarterback's gun shy, if he's hesitant, if he's unwilling to take the shots that we've seen him take, but do so in a more calculated manner. And that's a huge thing they're going to have to dig into this offseason and find a solution for, quite frankly. I will say, too, one thing that helps is, and I'll get to an answer. I'm going to give you an answer. I'm just building it up. I'm giving a case for both sides. One thing that helps Jayden Daniels a whole hell of a lot, he has a true number 1 wide receiver in scary Terry McLaurin. McLaurin this year had 82 receptions, 1,096 yards, 13 touchdowns. All would have been tops for the wide receiver corps in Green Bay. All of those would have led Green Bay's wide receiver group. 82 receptions, 1,096 yards, 13 touchdowns. You see when he was in a pinch in Tampa and when he was in a pinch in Detroit and there was third downs, they needed to move the sticks and they needed to convert. A lot of times Daniels is like, defense isn't, no, I'm going to McLaurin, I'm still going to him. And a lot of them are great passes. A lot of them are great catches by Terry McLaurin. I'm telling you, whether it's the draft or free agency, and I think it's more likely to be in free agency than the draft, given on where Green Bay is selecting, they have to get an alpha in the wide receiver room. And I'm still clinging on hope to the Jets releasing Davante Adams this offseason and there being some sort of reunion in the works that financially makes sense for Green Bay to bring Davante home for the last couple years, potentially last couple years of his career. That has helped Jayden Daniels a lot. You give a rookie quarterback a true number 1 wide receiver, it can do wonders. It can absolutely do wonders. So, Jordan Love, Jayden Daniels. At this very moment, and the last angle of this I'll throw out there, for intents and purposes of this debate, this conversation, this dialogue, this topic. Jayden Daniels being on a rookie deal compared to Love and his big boy contract, I mean, you have to include that as part of the discussion. Jayden Daniels in 1 year on a rookie deal, showing the composure of a 10-year vet and the playmaking ability with his legs of a Lamar Jackson. I'm taking Jayden Daniels over Jordan Love at this moment if I'm starting a franchise today or tomorrow. And that's not a knock on Jordan Love. It's not to say it's doom and gloom. It's not to say Jordan Love can't right the wrongs of the last month of this season and play with his hair on fire next year, and the passing game can't click because it can, and they can figure things out because they can this offseason. Jayden Daniels has just been that good. And if I'm starting a franchise right now, and those are my two options at quarterback, I am taking Jayden Daniels, a true dual threat quarterback, has his team in the NFC Championship, and you can call me prisoner of the moment, that's fine, on a rookie deal, has shown the composure, that ice in the veins mentality. And again, the contract part certainly factors into this, but like Jayden Daniels, if he keeps playing this way, is going to have a huge payday in a few years. Green Bay gave Jordan Love the going rate, and now they have to make sure that pays off financially and on the field in terms of wins and losses. Again, I said this in a past video a couple weeks ago. There is a lot of pressure on Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love entering next season, both individually and to cohesively work together as a pair and a duo, a coach-quarterback duo on the field for the Green Bay Packers. There's going to be an intensified pressure that I don't think either of them have felt entering next season. I'm not saying during the season. A lot of it can be alleviated if the passing game starts to click again and Green Bay's piling up wins and they're sitting atop the NFC North as September turns to October to November to December. But there will be an added pressure, I'm telling you, entering next season on both of them. And Jayden Daniels, win-lose in Philly, great performance, good performance, average, abysmal performance, will not take away from a sensational rookie season where nobody thought Washington would be among the last four teams standing in the NFL. And again, it's not a knock on Jordan Love. You have to keep in mind the contracts. And if Daniels keeps balling out in a few years, he'll get the massive payday. But right now, it's just the rookie deal. His team's still alive, and they're alive in large part because of him. Jayden Daniels is a rookie, but it is true to the core that if you take him off this team, they're not playing Philly this weekend. You take Jayden Daniels off this team, and who's their backup? Marcus Mariota? No disrespect to Mariota. You take Jayden Daniels off this team, they're not a playoff team. Washington's not a playoff team. Whereas you could say, oh, well, you could say that for any quarterback situation. Bo Nix had a pretty good rookie season in Denver. They made the playoffs. I don't know who their backup is in Denver off the top of my head, but if you slotted in a veteran quarterback with competence that got along with Sean Payton, because clearly the marriage between he and Russell Wilson wasn't going to work, I think Sean Payton's a good enough coach, a real good coach, that he could have, with that roster, that defense, found a way to snuck into the playoffs. Not a knock on Bo Nix, but I'm saying if you take all quarterbacks off their team, it doesn't mean the team gets visibly worse. Jayden Daniels is at that level where if you took him off Washington, I don't even think they're a playoff team. That's how good he's been this year. That's how good he's been in the postseason. And I'll finish with this. Jayden Daniels this year, 3,000. This is just regular season. Jayden Daniels this year, 3,568 passing yards. Love had 3,389. Daniels had 31 total TDs. Love had 26 total TDs. Daniels had 9 interceptions. Love had 11. They all came in the first 8 games. Daniels had a 100.1 quarterback rating. Love had a 96.7. Daniels had a 70.5 QBR. Love had a 69.2 QBR. Now, I know what point people are going to bring up. When I bring up the fact that Daniels had more yards and more total touchdowns than Jordan Love, they'll say, well, hey, Love missed the Indianapolis game. He missed the Tennessee game. He left the Jacksonville game early. He left the Chicago game early. Look at pass attempts. Look at total pass attempts. Daniels finished with 480, Love with 425. So not a big discrepancy there. Not a big discrepancy in the passing yards and the total touchdown disparity either, but Daniels had more yards passing And I'm not even counting rushing yards because Daniels had 891 while Jordan Love had, what did I say, 83. And he had more total touchdowns. And I know Love missed more time than Daniels, but look at pass attempts. It wasn't that different. You have to look at pass attempts here. You can't look at games played. The equalizer is the pass attempts to try to balance it out. And Daniels threw it 480 times to Love's 425. He just had a better season. And he's going to be riding a high going into his sophomore campaign, regardless of what happens in Philly. And can you imagine if they beat the Philadelphia Eagles and we have a rookie quarterback starting in the big one in New Orleans against either Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills or Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs? Again, this is not a doom and gloom. I hope a year from now I'm pivoting and I'm saying I'm taking Jordan Love over Jayden Daniels, or, hey, it's a complete coin flip as to what quarterback I would take to start a franchise with. But I found it interesting that we've got a rookie in Washington, wheeling and dealing, has his team among the final four left standing. And if I were starting a franchise today, I would take Jayden Daniels over Jordan Love. Nature of the beast is what it is. Love and the Packers can certainly rebound and get that passing game back on track. And it needs to be noted that, Jordan Love in his first 2 years as a starting quarterback in the NFL has gotten the Packers to the playoffs both times. And this year it was in by far the most accomplished division record-wise in the National Football League. And so we'll see. They have some work to do this offseason to get the passing game back on track. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate all the support. We'll see you next time.